Love makes us do crazy things. Throughout history, the desire to impress someone we're attracted to has driven people to extraordinary acts of courage, creativity, and sometimes spectacular stupidity. From the knights of medieval times jousting for a lady's favor, to modern-day daredevils posting increasingly dangerous stunts on social media, the need to show off has been hardwired into human behavior for millennia. But what happens when that primal urge to impress goes too far? When the line between confidence and recklessness blurs? When a moment of showing off becomes the last moment of your life? Today, we're diving into some of the most shocking, tragic, and frankly dumbest deaths ever recorded, all caused by one thing: trying to impress someone they were attracted to. These aren't just accidents. They're cautionary tales about ego, poor judgment, and the deadly consequences of letting your desire to look cool override your basic survival instincts. Case 1. The scooter deer, duel. Our first story takes us to Taiwan in 2004, where a routine evening commute turned into one of the most bizarre and tragic love triangle incidents ever recorded. In Taiwan, scooters aren't just a mode of transportation. They're a way of life. Millions of people use them daily to navigate the island's crowded streets and winding mountain roads. They're practical, affordable, and for young people, they're also a symbol of freedom and independence. On this particular evening, 2 young men were riding their scooters along a narrow, rural road. Each had a female passenger riding behind them. The atmosphere was likely relaxed, maybe even romantic. Couples in Taiwan often go on evening scooter rides together, enjoying the cool air and the scenery. But what happened next was anything but romantic. As the 2 scooters approached each other from opposite directions on the narrow road, a wild deer suddenly appeared. Now, deer in Taiwan are generally shy and avoid humans. But during mating season, male deer become territorial, aggressive, and unpredictable. This particular deer, likely in the throes of hormonal fury, decided to challenge both scooters. Here's where testosterone and stupidity entered the equation. Instead of stopping, slowing down, or simply waiting for the deer to move, both young men made the same catastrophically bad decision. They decided to show off. With their female passengers watching, neither wanted to appear weak or scared. So they both accelerated, apparently thinking they could intimidate the deer or simply speed past it. The deer, however, had other plans. In a scene that sounds like it's straight out of a dark comedy, the animal stood its ground and attacked. The exact mechanics of what happened next aren't entirely clear from the reports, but the result was devastating. Both scooters crashed. Both male riders were killed instantly. The 2 female passengers survived, likely traumatized not just by the accident, but by the sheer senselessness of it. Think about this for a moment. 2 young men, probably in their 20s, with their whole lives ahead of them, died because they couldn't bring themselves to show even a moment of caution in front of a girl. The irony is almost unbearable. They wanted to look brave, strong, and in control. Instead, they demonstrated the opposite: a complete lack of judgment and an inability to assess real danger. The deer, meanwhile, walked away unharmed, having successfully defended its territory against 2 motorized opponents. This case perfectly encapsulates the theme of our video: the desire to impress, to not lose face, to appear masculine and fearless. All of these impulses are deeply human. But when they override basic common sense, the results can be fatal. Those 2 young women didn't want a hero. They wanted their boyfriends to come home alive. Case 2. The balcony show-off. From Taiwan, we travel to the American Midwest, to a quiet apartment complex in Ohio in 2007. This is a story that starts with young love, and ends with a fall that no one saw coming. Except, perhaps, everyone who witnessed what happened just before. Our protagonist was a young man in his early 20s. He was visiting his girlfriend at her apartment, and by all accounts, the evening was going well. They were on her balcony, several stories above the ground, enjoying the night air and each other's company. But at some point, our young Romeo decided that simply being there wasn't enough. He wanted to do something memorable, something impressive, something that would make her laugh, gasp, or maybe just look at him with admiration. So he climbed onto the balcony railing. Now, let's pause here. Balcony railings are designed for one purpose: to keep you from falling off the balcony. They are not stages. They are not balance beams. They are not platforms for performance art. They are safety barriers. But in the mind of a young man trying to impress a woman, logic often takes a back seat to bravado. Witnesses, including his girlfriend, watched as he stood on the narrow railing, arms spread wide, likely grinning, maybe even saying something like, "Look at me," or "Watch this." For a brief moment, he probably felt like a king, like he was on top of the world, like he was the coolest, most daring guy she'd ever met. And then, gravity reminded him of a fundamental truth. Humans cannot fly. He lost his balance. There was no time to grab onto anything, no time to reconsider, no time to even regret the decision. He fell several stories and hit the ground below. The impact was catastrophic. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The cause of death was massive blunt force trauma, exactly what you'd expect from a multi-story fall onto concrete. His girlfriend, who had just moments before been enjoying a romantic evening, was now a witness to a preventable death. The psychological trauma of watching someone you care about die in such a sudden, violent, and senseless way is something she'll likely carry for the rest of her life. What makes this case so frustrating is how utterly avoidable it was. There was no external threat, no animal attack, no mechanical failure. Just a young man, a balcony railing, and a catastrophic lapse in judgment. He wasn't trying to save anyone. He wasn't responding to an emergency. He was simply trying to look cool. And it cost him everything. The Ohio balcony case is a stark reminder that the most dangerous stunts aren't always the ones that look dangerous. Sometimes it's the casual, spur-of-the-moment decisions, the watch this moments, that end in tragedy. Impressing someone is never worth your life. But in that moment, standing on that railing, he probably thought it was. Case 3. The no-hands driver. Our third case takes us to the Netherlands, a country known for its efficient roads, beautiful canals, and generally sensible population. But even in one of the safest countries in Europe, stupidity finds a way. This story involves a young man, his girlfriend, and a car, a combination that has ended badly more times than anyone can count. The details of this case are somewhat limited, as it wasn't as widely publicized as some of the others, but the core facts are clear and chilling. A young Dutch man was driving with his girlfriend in the passenger seat. They were on a highway or a main road, traveling at a significant speed. Everything was normal. And then, he decided to do something spectacularly stupid. He took his hands off the steering wheel. Not for a second. Not to adjust the radio or scratch his nose. He took his hands completely off the wheel and held them up in the air, likely with a big grin on his face, to show his girlfriend how confident and skilled he was. Look, no hands. It's a stunt that children do on bicycles. It's a joke. It's a way to show off. But when you're traveling at highway speed in a 2-ton vehicle, it's not funny. It's suicidal. For a brief moment, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 5, the car continued straight. Physics was on his side. Momentum kept the vehicle in its lane. He probably laughed. She probably gasped or laughed nervously. And then, the inevitable happened. The car began to drift. Without hands on the wheel, There's no way to make the tiny, constant corrections that drivers make unconsciously to keep a vehicle centered in its lane. The car veered. He reached for the wheel, but it was too late. At high speed, even a small deviation can become catastrophic in an instant. The car went off the road. What happened next was a violent, chaotic crash. The vehicle likely rolled, hit a barrier, or collided with another object. The young man was killed. The reports don't specify whether his girlfriend survived, but given the severity of the crash, it's likely she was either killed or seriously injured. This case is infuriating because it's so preventable and so pointless. Driving is one of the most dangerous things we do on a daily basis. Traffic accidents are one of the leading causes of death worldwide, especially among young people. Every driving instructor, every parent, every public safety campaign hammers home the same message. Keep your hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, and your focus on driving. But our Dutch driver ignored all of that. Why? To impress his girlfriend. To show her he was cool, confident, and in control. Instead, he showed her and the world that he was reckless, immature, and fatally overconfident. The desire to look impressive overrode every bit of common sense and self-preservation instinct he had. The no-hands driving stunt is a perfect example of how the male ego can turn a routine situation into a death sentence. He wasn't trying to do anything heroic. He wasn't saving anyone. He was just showing off. And it killed him. Case 4. The chainsaw Casanova. From the Netherlands, we travel across the Atlantic to the rural woods of Maine, USA, where in 1999, a young man made a decision so catastrophically stupid that it defies comprehension. This is the story of a man, a woman, and a chainsaw, a combination that should never, ever be used to impress anyone. The man in question was in his 20s, and he was trying to impress a woman he was interested in. The setting was likely informal, maybe a backyard, a driveway, or a rural property where chainsaws are common tools. Chainsaws are used extensively in Maine for cutting firewood, clearing land, and maintaining properties. They're powerful, loud, and incredibly dangerous. Even experienced users treat them with respect, wearing protective gear and following strict safety protocols. But our protagonist wasn't interested in safety. He was interested in looking tough, capable, and impressive. So he picked up a chainsaw, fired it up, and decided to show off. The exact nature of his stunt isn't fully detailed in the reports, but the general idea is clear. He was handling the chainsaw in a reckless, theatrical way, likely waving it around, making exaggerated movements, or performing some kind of trick to demonstrate his fearlessness and skill. Chainsaws are designed to cut through wood with terrifying efficiency. The chain spins at thousands of revolutions per minute, with razor-sharp teeth that can slice through a tree trunk in seconds. When that chain comes into contact with human flesh, the results are catastrophic. There's no time to react, no time to pull away. The damage is instant and severe. In this case, the young man lost control of the chainsaw. It's unclear exactly how. Maybe he slipped. Maybe he misjudged a movement. Maybe the saw kicked back in a way he didn't expect. But the result was horrific. The chainsaw struck him, causing massive, fatal injuries. The reports describe the injuries as gruesome, which in the context of a chainsaw accident likely means extensive lacerations, severed arteries, or worse. He died at the scene. There was nothing anyone could do. The woman he was trying to impress was left traumatized, having witnessed one of the most violent and horrific deaths imaginable. Instead of being impressed, she was scarred for life. The Maine chainsaw case is particularly disturbing because chainsaws are not toys. They're not props. They're industrial tools designed to destroy organic matter with extreme prejudice. Every year, Thousands of people are injured in chainsaw accidents, and many of those injuries are fatal. Professional loggers, who use chainsaws daily, treat them with extreme caution. They wear protective gear, follow strict safety procedures, and never, ever use them to show off. But our victim wasn't a professional. He was a young man with a chainsaw and an audience. And that combination proved lethal. The desire to appear masculine, tough, and fearless overrode every survival instinct he had. He wanted to impress her. Instead, he horrified her. This case serves as a brutal reminder that some tools are simply too dangerous to be used carelessly. A chainsaw is not a toy. It's not a prop for a performance. It's a lethal instrument that demands respect. And when that respect is absent, the consequences are swift, brutal, and final. Case 5. The Spider-Man Stunt. Our fifth case takes us to one of the most spectacular natural wonders on Earth, Victoria Falls, located on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe in southern Africa. Known locally as Mosi Oa-Tunya, or the Smoke That Thunders, Victoria Falls is one of the largest and most powerful waterfalls in the world. During peak flow, over 500 million liters of water per minute cascade over the edge, plunging more than 100 meters into the gorge below. It's a place of breathtaking beauty and raw, terrifying power. It's also a place where people regularly take risks to get the perfect photo or to impress their companions. There's even a famous spot called Devil's Pool, a natural rock pool right at the edge of the falls, where, during the dry season when water levels are low, tourists can swim right up to the precipice and look over the edge. It's thrilling, it's terrifying, and it's relatively safe if you follow the rules and go with a guide. But our protagonist wasn't interested in following the rules. He was a young man, likely a tourist, visiting the falls with a group that included at least one woman he was trying to impress. And he decided that simply viewing the falls from a safe distance, or even swimming in Devil's Pool with a guide, wasn't enough. He wanted to do something more dramatic, something that would make him stand out, something that would make her remember him. So he decided to recreate a scene from Spider-Man. According to reports, he climbed out onto the slippery rocks near the edge of the falls and attempted to pose like Spider-Man, crouched down, one hand on the rock, looking heroic and daring. It's the kind of pose that looks great in a movie or a comic book. But movies have stunt coordinators, safety harnesses, and CGI. Real life has gravity, slippery rocks, and a 100-meter drop into a churning abyss. The rocks at Victoria Falls are constantly wet from the spray and mist. They're covered in algae and moss. They're treacherous even when you're walking carefully. Trying to pose on them, especially in a crouched position that requires balance and stability, is insanely dangerous. But our Spider-Man wannabe either didn't realize this or didn't care. He was focused on the pose, on the photo, on impressing the woman watching him. He slipped. There was no safety net, no web shooters, no last-minute save. He fell over the edge and plummeted into the gorge below. The fall alone would have been fatal, but the churning water at the base of Victoria Falls is a death trap. The force of the water creates powerful undercurrents and whirlpools that can hold a body underwater indefinitely. His body was eventually recovered, but there was no hope of survival. Thongtiam, woman he was trying to impress, along with everyone else in the group, was left traumatized. What should have been an awe-inspiring visit to one of the world's great natural wonders turned into a nightmare, and all because one man couldn't resist the urge to show off. The Victoria Falls Spider-Man case is particularly tragic because the location itself is already impressive enough. You don't need to do anything to make Victoria Falls more dramatic. It's one of the most powerful waterfalls on the planet. Simply being there, simply witnessing it, is enough. But for some people, being a spectator isn't enough. They need to be the star of the show. They need to be the one everyone remembers. And in this case, he will be remembered, not as a hero, not as Spider-Man, but as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ego, recklessness, and the desperate need to impress. Case 6. The balcony serenade gone wrong. Our final case is the most recent, occurring in early 2025 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It's a story that made international headlines, not just because of the tragic death, but because of the sheer absurdity and preventability of it. This is the story of a 32-year-old man who fell to his death while trying to impress a woman with a romantic gesture that went catastrophically wrong. On the evening of January 3, 2025, the man was at a condominium in the Jalan Ipoh area of Kuala Lumpur. He was with a 29-year-old woman, and by all accounts, he was trying to woo her. The setting was a high-rise apartment building, and at some point during the evening, he decided to do something romantic, something memorable, something that would sweep her off her feet. He decided to climb out onto the balcony and serenade her. Now, serenading someone from a balcony is a classic romantic gesture. It's the stuff of Shakespeare, of Romeo and Juliet, of countless romantic comedies. But there's a key detail in those stories. Romeo was on the ground, looking up at Juliet's balcony. He wasn't standing on a narrow ledge several stories above the ground. But our modern-day Romeo didn't think that through. According to reports from the Kuala Lumpur police, he climbed over the balcony railing, the same safety barrier designed to keep people from falling, and positioned himself on the narrow outer ledge. His plan, apparently, was to sing to her from this precarious position, creating a dramatic and romantic moment she'd never forget. He was right about one thing. She'll never forget it. But not for the reasons he hoped. As he was positioning himself on the ledge, he lost his balance. There are conflicting reports about exactly what happened. Some sources suggest he slipped, others suggest he misjudged the space and simply fell. But the result was the same. He plunged from the balcony and fell several stories to the ground below. Emergency services were called immediately. He was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries from the fall were too severe. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The woman he was trying to impress was left in shock, having witnessed the horrific death of someone who was simply trying to make her happy. The Kuala Lumpur police confirmed the details of the case, and it quickly spread across social media and news outlets. The reaction was a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. How could someone think this was a good idea? Why would anyone risk their life for a romantic gesture? What was he thinking? The answer, of course, is that he probably wasn't thinking. He was feeling. He was caught up in the moment, in the desire to create a memorable experience, to be romantic, to be the kind of man who does grand gestures. And in that moment, the rational part of his brain, the part that understands physics, gravity, and the purpose of safety railings, was completely overridden by emotion and ego. The Kuala Lumpur balcony case is a perfect encapsulation of everything we've discussed in this video. The desire to impress, to be romantic, to create a moment. These are all natural, human impulses. But when they override basic safety and common sense, the results can be fatal. A simple, "I like you," or a bouquet of flowers would have been infinitely more effective than a death-defying stunt on a balcony ledge. His death was entirely preventable. There was no external threat, no emergency, no reason to be on that ledge. Just a man, a balcony, and a catastrophically bad decision made in the name of love. So, what have we learned from these 6 tragic stories? The desire to impress someone we're attracted to is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. It's driven art, music, architecture, and countless acts of genuine courage throughout history. But it's also driven some of the dumbest, most preventable deaths ever recorded. From the deer-fighting scooter riders of Taiwan to the balcony serenader of Kuala Lumpur, Every single one of these deaths had one thing in common. They were completely avoidable. No one forced these men to take these risks. There was no emergency, no life or death situation that required heroism. Just ego, poor judgment, and the overwhelming need to look impressive. The tragic irony is that the people they were trying to impress didn't want a show. They wanted a partner, a friend, someone who would still be there tomorrow. Instead, they got trauma, grief, and a memory they'll carry forever. So, if you take anything away from these stories, let it be this. The most impressive thing you can do for someone you care about is to stay alive. Be safe. Use common sense. Don't climb on balcony railings. Don't take your hands off the steering wheel. Don't fight deer on a scooter. And for the love of everything, don't juggle chainsaws. Because at the end of the day, no one is impressed by a corpse.